Alright, hey guys, so this is a 2007-2008 ZX6R motor. You're looking at the problem right now. Actually, you can see that I'm actually missing a chunk of the valve guide, and I believe that this is what's causing my seizure. I found part of the valve guide sitting in the air box, and now I'm concerned where the other parts of the valve guide are, so we're gonna have to tear this thing apart and figure out where the problem is, or why the motor sees and not turning over. So I guess my plan was to just document sort of the rebuild procedure. Just since I've seen so many videos on YouTube that have been helpful, I figured I'd try and return the favor as much as I could. So yeah, I guess first step is to take the cylinder head cover off, and then we can go ahead and remove the camshafts.
So what you're seeing here is pretty much just removing the valve cover. There's 6 bolts. It's pretty straightforward. This is some kind of breather hose. I just used some WD-40 to penetrate in there because it was stuck. And then I like to use some saran wrap just to cover parts while they're in storage.
Alright, hey guys, so I have the valve cover removed right now, and there's not too much more that we'll be able to see. I just wanted to show it's pretty easy to take the valve cover off. There's this guy right here, this guy right here, 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 and here. So basically there's just 6 bolts that you have to remove. And this is actually, I like to label everything, but you can see it's just the valve cover bolts. They're pretty simple to remove. The next step for me is going to be taking the camshaft chain tensioner off, and this isn't so bad. You release this cap bolt here, then once you pull that assembly out, there's like a spring and a push rod, then you can go ahead and pull these 2 mounting bolts off. So I've got the camshaft chain tensioner out. The biggest thing I forgot to mention was that technically you're supposed to open up these timing caps here, and you're supposed to turn the crankshaft so you get the camshafts into a certain position where it's not going to be putting too much tension on the valves, so that it becomes easier to actually unscrew these bolts and remove the camshaft caps. Unfortunately, I don't have that option because of course the motor is seized, so I went ahead and pulled the camshaft chain tensioner out first. Now what I have to do is follow the untightening sequence. There's a specific order that each one of these bolts has to follow in its removal and installation, so that you don't actually warp one way or another these camshaft caps. And because I wasn't able to get the camshafts rotated to the exact position that the service manual says to move them to, I'm going to have to go very, very, very slowly and evenly remove these. It's going to take some time, but it's better than warping these camshaft caps.
Yes, that is an old school oil can. The first thing I always think of is Wizard of the Oz, but yeah, it's mostly important when you're reassembling the motor to make sure you lubricate right around all of the buckets and where the camshaft lobes are, but I like to take that precaution even when I'm disassembling. The other thing you're seeing me do here is being really, really meticulous about following the loosening sequence, and it's taking a long time because the valve springs are pushing up on the camshafts, which are pushing up on the camshaft caps, which are pushing up then again on the camshaft cap screws, so it stays tight for a long time. So be very patient and follow that procedure.
So I've got the camshafts removed, I've got the camshaft caps removed. All of that is good except for this one little bugger right here, one of these camshaft cap guides. Actually, I think this is for the valve cover, stuck in there. I'll worry about that once I get the cylinder head off. Not too concerned about that one right now. You just want to make sure that all of these little guides here, these little they're not spacers, they're guides that help it seat straight. You want to make sure that you have all of those accounted for, that they either came off with camshaft caps or that they're still sitting in the head. As you can see, the diameter of this circle is smaller than the diameter of this circle, and that's because this hole right here is accommodating that guide. So just make sure that you've accounted for all of them. Like I said, I've got one bugger that's stuck here. I could mash it with some pliers just to get it out, but then I'm going to have to replace it, so I'll worry about that one later. The biggest thing I found, which was interesting, was this valve bucket here, the one that's raised up. It was actually set up about 1/4 of an inch further than all of the other ones. You can see all of the others are just flush. This one actually was raised, and again, this is the broken valve guide, so when I lifted the bucket, I don't know if you can see all of that debris. You can see the shim is not set up properly. There's debris in here. So yeah, this is not good. This means hopefully the motor didn't run long after I lost all compression. At that point I pretty much shut the motor off, and so hopefully this metal hasn't destroyed the engine from the inside out, but again, that's why we're pulling the whole thing apart and we're going to inspect everything. So normally there's supposed to be 2 split keepers, but there are none in here, and I can almost guarantee you that's what all this debris here is a result of. So not good. That means the valve, actually, if you can see the valve stem on the left hand side of that hole. That means it's actually not lined up with the hole in the retainer. It's actually offset and sitting crooked in there. So this whole thing here is pretty much destroyed. It's probably going to be difficult to see with the lighting, but these fleckles on the buckets are actually metal shavings. If you see them, there's 3 visible ones here. They're all over the place, and that's not good. That's telling me that I've had metal shavings indefinitely floating around my engine. So at least I know to look for some scoring. I checked these bearings, these recesses here. These are all good. Everything is okay here. So I'm going to look at the cylinder walls and see how trashed they are. Yeah, so I'm not expecting to find great things as we move forward. Just one more thing. I wanted to show you guys everything as it came out. This is the intake camshaft. I've got the exhaust camshaft here, and I'm going to wrap them up in a saran wrap. But you also have the camshaft upper guide here. You can see the little Delrin slider. This is the camshaft, the actual sprocket caps. Here are the right 2 cylinder caps. It's one assembly, and the left 2 cylinder caps. Again, you just want to make sure all of these little guides and seals are accounted for. And one other thing, you definitely don't want to mix the left and the right camshaft guide up, because these are actually machined with the cylinder head. So if you get these mixed up, chances are the bearings, the grooves here, are not going to be correct, and you're going to get a lot of wobble in the camshaft. So just make sure everything is exactly in the position you took it off. Make sure that everything is accounted for. Now we're actually ready to go ahead and pull the whole head off, which is cool. So this part's actually pretty simple. This is, I guess, inner camshaft chain guide bolt. Essentially what we're going to do is pull that out, which will allow us to pull this, I think it's a Delrin chain guide. We're going to pull that out. I'll probably wait till I get the head off to pull that out. It might be easier to fish it out with this part of the body gone. But nonetheless, this has to come out before we can do anything else. Once that's out, we can go ahead and follow the service manual loosening sequence for these cylinder head mounting bolts. I think there's 8 of them, not 100% sure on that, but again, I'm just going to follow the service manual exactly to the spec.
So this is that camshaft chain guide bolt I showed you earlier. I wanted you to see that there actually is a gasket on there. Make sure you don't lose that gasket.
I just wanted to point out that the cylinder head mounting bolts on this side, they're actually hex keys, I guess, Allen socket cap screws. not sure what you call them, but these are pretty standard. The issue I ran into was actually all of the other bolts, and they're easier to see over here. They're kind of like this inverted Torx, and at first I thought it was just a normal like a 12-point socket screw, but I actually started to spin, and my first sign that I knew something was weird was that I tried using an 11mm socket. See there, 11, which I thought was strange because on all the bikes I've owned and worked on, I've never used an 11mm socket, so it fits nicely. 10 doesn't fit, 12 is too big. So that combined with the fact that these had such a weird shape to them, I'm gonna have to do a little bit of research, and I really wanted to get the head off, pull the valves out so that I could measure everything. Today's Sunday, so I wanted to have everything on order tonight so that by next weekend I'd be ready to start reassembly. But it looks like that isn't going to happen, so I'll be back tomorrow to continue once I have the correct tool to pull this off.